Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming today. I know you're spoiled for choice, literally, in terms of how many sessions you can go to. So I'm looking around, I recognize some familiar faces from the industry. Then there's a number of newcomers from the industry, or maybe from other industries who want to participate in this telecom industry. Let me introduce myself. My name is Adolfo Hernandez. I am still, for just about, running the global telco business at AWS. I'll be shortly going and doing something else, and Shivas Nambiar, who sat here on my left-hand side, or your left-hand side as well, will be taking over from me. He's going to be doing part of the presentation with me as well. And then our chief technologist, Ishwar, who's normally paired with me to do these sessions, is also now going to be pairing Shivas, sign of the times to come. So what I wanted to do was sort of build a little bit of a bridge back to some of the discussions we've been having here over the last 3 years, at the time where I've been in charge, and then sort of set the platform for the discussions as to what the future is going to bring, not only new leadership, but also the future of this industry and the kind of innovations that we're talking about and that we're working on. Hopefully everyone is super excited about some of the things Adam talked about this morning, and then some of you, those of you who are more technically inclined, might have enjoyed a lot the session last night, the keynote. And you're going to be hearing a lot more telco-focused discussion in this session, which is probably going to put it more in the context of a real industry and a number of use cases. So if you were here, or whenever we were last year, I think it was at the Venetian, one of the things that, well, we spent most of the presentation talking about what we saw happening at the industry, right? So we spent quite a lot of time talking about this transition from telco to techco, and we talk about a number of successful CSPs who were embarking on that transition. We also talked about the cloudification of the industry and how that was manifesting itself, because of the work we were doing in the architecture, getting everywhere in the telco domain, but also using SaaS more than the traditional acquisition models. And we talked about monetization opportunities, and those of you who are here will remember we sort of covered a number of those. So if I go back now with the benefit of hindsight, and if I look at what's happened, right? Those were sort of the predictions and the things that we saw that were going to be happening. And I think if you look at it in 3 different buckets, first the transforming the telco bucket, and then the monetization bucket on the right-hand side, it's been a pretty busy year. Right, so we've been announcing some very telco-specific services like Telco Network Builder. We've been doing a number of transformations with some of our customers. We've been doing some of the core IT application migrations in a telco domain, like the stuff we've done with Deutsche Telekom with their gigabit migrating a ton of applications in very little period of time. We've been migrating a number of OSS and BSS customers. And we've been doing a lot of transformation in the sort of the inside part of how a telco can run on the cloud more efficiently. More interesting, though, probably is what's on the right-hand side, because it's bringing the benefits of a telco who has a go-to-market ambition both on the enterprise and on the consumer side, together with democratization of opportunities you get with the cloud. And you have seen there, you can start seeing there, things like you wouldn't have seen a few years ago, like a traditional telco like Telia, fully re-engineering their workforce, doing a number of retraining in data applications, analytics, getting into image recognition, offering solutions to a logistics company like Transval to do logistics center image recognition and processing. And you're starting to see a number of examples there. BT announcing late last year that they wanted to bring together their capability, their connectivity, their solutions together with the cloud and go to market and go after a very ambitious go-to-market number. And you also saw us announce at Mobile World Congress integrated private wireless to build capabilities on top of the AWS cloud for telcos, those who were announced at the time, Orange, Telefonica, T-Mobile, Deutsche Telekom, to really just be able to build private wireless on the cloud. And then on the most radical side of modernization, some of you might have seen this morning Zainal from TELUS participating at a panel and talking about some of the stuff that we're doing in terms of building a smart home solution on the AWS cloud and using our IoT capabilities for a telco to be able to monetize that smart home space. You saw the Dish Boost Infinite offer, those of you here in North America, coming together. I think it was announced around Christmas last year. And then there's been a number of other things that we've been demonstrating, like the Optus subscription platform, et cetera. So the platform has been set. Telcos will continue to transform on the cloud. And telcos will continue to use the cloud to monetize. I think what's changing now is all of this is going to be augmented by Gen AI, and we're going to see a faster pace of transformation internally through the capabilities of Gen AI, and we're going to see a much faster and more radical way of thinking in terms of reimagine that future and monetizing it. So super exciting time for this industry. I think it was just about time. It's been a pretty rough space for a while, challenging, but I'm super convinced that this sort of journey of bringing the two together, the telecommunication industry and the cloud capabilities on AWS, is really going to pay off. So as such, let me just hand over, I guess, to the future. Shivas, all yours.
Thank you, Adolfo. All right, so the future. It is interesting when you look back over a year and you see all of these announcements that we've done, and you think about every one of this as a story with an operator, a customer, where they're trying to figure out how to operate differently. And if you think about what we talk about when we say, in Amazon, we work backwards from a customer need, right? And the customer need in this case started with things like, we wanted to help digitize industries. We want to drive an impact in an industry with the capabilities that a telco brings to bear. We want to spend time really figuring out, because our consumers are starting to think about how much they're paying us, what are they paying us for, how do I continue to retain, attract that consumer base, what should I do to provide great consumer experiences? And if you think about those as the outcomes that you're working backwards from for a telco, then you say, all right, for this telco, what do I need to do internally to be able to satisfy those needs for my customers? And you'll start to see this theme, which we've been hearing from telcos for the last, I'd say, 24 months, that says we really want to get a lot simpler at what we do internally in our business. We want to drive the same kind of resilience that we've had. Telcos famously think about 5 nines, and for a very good reason, right? It's national critical infrastructure. And they want to create that, but with a model that says we need to get to better efficiency, we need to get to better cost models in our industry. How do you help us transform? And at AWS, we've been helping them do this for 10 plus years, and we now have a point of view on what is necessary. And it's an entire stack of capabilities that you need as a telco. The bottommost rung here, as you see, is our AWS cloud infrastructure, right? So we've got the broadest global infrastructure with 102 availability zones. And an availability zone is a collection of data centers, and it's across 32 regions. And so when you think about the power of that, if you are a telco and you are needing infrastructure, it is more than likely that we will have something that fits your need. We provide a cloud edge continuum, which we'll talk about in a second. And then we provide innovation in a couple of different areas in this infrastructure that helps you get to that efficiency that you're looking for, that gets you to the simplification that you're looking for, that gets you to a sustainable model for energy, for cost that you're looking for. And we'll talk about that in a second. Then we have an opinion about workloads. So what are the actual telco workloads? What do we do to help you run these workloads the right way? Value-added services, Adolfo talked about, Zainul talking about smart home. So value-added services that are new things that you're inventing as a telco. Capabilities that you have today around contact centers, how does that improve? Co-inventing new connectivity services. And then how do you provide all of these in a form that a builder in your organization can use? So API-driven, easily accessible, monetizable, in terms of like, you know how much a transaction is going to cost. So that's the stack. And we'll talk about innovation at every part of the stack that AWS brings to bear, which helps you become that smarter, more efficient, more sustainable telco. Across these layers, there are also some key enablers. So everybody here has spent a lot of time hearing about Gen AI in the last couple of days. You'll continue to hear about it because it is transformational. We can start to see the impacts of it. But it's not just Gen AI. It's right, analytics, it's machine learning. It's how do you take the key capabilities that you want and apply it at every level in the stack that you see. Second enabler is what do you need to do to be a telco that is deeply regulated in most cases. You have customer data that you need protecting a certain way. You have local geographic restrictions for your data. How do you make sure that's not a bolt-on, right? How do we, as AWS, help you make sure that that is cared for in the stack at every level? And that's an enabler for you to move fast. And finally, we have the largest partner community. So if you think about innovation and you say, well, AWS brings innovation to bear, great. The telcos themselves build innovation in, but there are places where to get to that innovation faster or to get to that innovation at all sometimes, you need a partner to deliver some capability to you. And that you will find the community of the partners that work with telcos, the deepest bench is with AWS. And so you get these three enablers across the entire stack. So I want to talk about maybe a couple of examples of what does innovation look like at a few of these stacks, right? At a few of these levels. So if you think about silicon and what AWS does in providing you infrastructure at the silicon level that is more efficient and effective. You just heard Adam announce the Graviton4 instances, 30% faster than the Graviton3 instances, which we have seen is, if you compare those against x86 instances, they're 20% cheaper, they are 60% more power efficient. And so that's innovation where if you as an operator are trying to build a more sustainable business model, you don't have to go build that innovation. We bring that to you, right? So every telco that I talk to will tell me that they want to run a more energy efficient entity. Telcos globally take 2 to 3% of the entire energy usage in the globe. How do you make sure that that gets lower? How do you make sure that when you see what happened in Europe in the last year, where prices doubled in some cases for energy, that your impact to your business is lower? What AWS brings in terms of innovation to that energy requirement is that we give you, in Europe specifically, for example, AWS data centers, running a workload in AWS data centers compared to a European data center is 5x more efficient, right? And 90% of all Amazon workloads today are powered by renewable energy sources. In 2025, it's going to be 100%. So if you're a telco, are you spending time trying to figure out how to innovate in that portion of the stack? If you work with AWS, you don't need to, and it helps you build your more sustainable future. So these are types of innovations that we bring in at the infrastructure level. If we talk about data stores and analytics, 15 plus different types of data stores and engines that today we use, that you can use as an operator to figure out what is a custom built for purpose data source and engine that you want to use. How do you make sure that you are not independently building it, running it, managing it, and kind of spending all your time in the infrastructure portion of it, but are actually working on the workload itself? That's a portion of innovation that we build as AWS for you. If you think about enterprise IT software, figuring out how to build globally distributed workloads that don't require you to manage the failover, the resilience, the redundancy, and still allow you to do the 5 nines model. We provide you, in many cases, one-click implementations that allow you to scale, that allow you to get distributed in multiple regions, multiple AZs. That's an example of innovation that we're bringing to bear. So If you think about the AWS infrastructure, and we talked about the availability zones and the regions and the cloud continuum, why is it important? And we'll take an example of a customer like Dish. So let's start with the actual continuum. So we talk about regions. Regions are multiple availability zones in a location. You have local zones, wavelength zones, which are metro area implementations of infrastructure. And then for workloads that require you to be on-prem, you have outposts. And then for the far edge, which is things that are smaller form factor, really closer to your customer edge, we have outpost servers, we have Snow devices. And the thing that makes building workloads for this continuum easier is that for a core set of services, it is the exact same set of services, same set of APIs, and tools that provide that consistent experience. So when you take a workload like building a national new network infrastructure like Dish did, and you start to decompose it, and you say, what do I need for my Open RAN network? What do I need for my core? I start to decompose it, and I look at the components and say, what characteristics do I need? Do I need to have latency or deal with latency budgets that are minimal, that need to sit closer to the customer? Do I need to take the traffic coming in from the user devices, and I need to break it out as close to the customer as possible? Then you put that workload into the local zones, which is what Dish did. For the things that can be aggregated in like more centralized locations, the control plane traffic that you can manage differently, you put that in the regions because the regions allow you to scale differently. It gives you a better cost model. With Dish, because they were able to do it, they went from a 20% to a 70% rollout across the entire country in a matter of 12 months. And I would argue that that is almost impossible to do with a model that is not built on AWS today. So that's a fit-for-purpose deployment based on your workload. So what's new in this space, in the continuum? We talked about local zones. Local zones are still shared infrastructure. Now we've got, in many countries, telcos that need dedicated infrastructure. And this dedicated infrastructure is necessary for exclusive use by a customer. In September, we announced these dedicated local zones. The key context is you tell us what you need built in what location. We will build it. We will manage it for you, very similar to any other AWS local zone. We will operate it for you, but you're also still getting the same benefits of a normal cloud environment where you're paying by the use. You are getting the elasticity that you need. You are getting the same security and governance models that you need. So that's something that's new that we announced. If you think about that, and then you kind of start to zoom out and say, is that the only thing that you need for data protection and sovereignty? We have a different point of view. We would argue that you should think about it in two different areas. So the first is just the data sovereignty piece, right, which is critical in multiple geographies where they come in and say, you need to have data residency in a country, in a location, and you need to restrict what operators can do with this data. So that's what we think about in terms of data sovereignty. There's another portion to this, which is when you're running your workloads, say you're running nationally critical infrastructure, which is what most telcos are, at what point, when something breaks, do you have the ability to control that in the constrained environment that you are, to make sure that you don't then have to depend externally to go solve for it? So that's operational sovereignty from our perspective. We've got multiple ways to do it. One of the things we've done is work with a partner, T-Systems, where, as an example, for data sovereignty, we've worked with them to create a service where they provide the key stores that they host, hardware modules that protect your keys so that AWS never manages those keys. That's an example of how we work with data sovereignty. But in some use cases, that's not enough. And so as we've been working with a lot of customers in Europe, especially telcos that are supporting the public sector operations in Europe or regulated workloads in industries in Europe, what we started to hear is that what they need is both operator access data residency requirements that are all in country that cannot be dependent on something outside of Europe and outside of the country in some cases. So in October, we announced our European Sovereign Cloud, which is a set of regions that we have designed that are physically and logically separated from the existing AWS infrastructure. They have complete isolation from an operator access perspective. It is all managed by EU citizens. And we think that unlocks for telcos in particular the ability to go out and bring in regulated workloads, industry workloads that typically they wouldn't be able to run in non-European operated environments. So this is coming soon, but I wouldn't say every single workload that's regulated needs to wait for this. You can, as I showed in the earlier slide, take dedicated local zones. You can take outposts in your environments as ways to solve for most of the use cases. And then there are particular cases where this sovereign cloud model is what's going to be necessary. That's the infrastructure side. We're also finding with operators, when we provide the right set of infrastructure, when we provide the right ways to build the workloads, that we're starting to co-invent some of the connectivity services and shape the connectivity services differently. As an example, if you think about an operator like BT, who we've been working with, Adolfo mentioned the SCA that we signed. BT had an ambition to really be a partner to customers that wanted to move workloads into the cloud. They wanted to have scale globally and be the preferred provider for any customer coming in and saying they want to move workloads to the cloud because they would have the broadest geographical reach. We've been working with them with our Direct Connect teams to say, how do we start to position the stage infrastructure for you to fulfill that ambition? And then provide programmatic access so that they can build the replacement to, let's say, the MPLS networks that they had, and start to transition into a new model. So that's co-inventing, but at a layer where we are staying paired up with BT so that they can connect into our infrastructure as close to the customer as possible and as scalable as possible across geographies. What's another example? Another example is something that I am actually pretty excited about, because I think for a long time we've had telcos that have been serving enterprise customers that don't have the ability to scale geographically to multiple locations because they just don't have the local infrastructure. And so for anyone who's gone through this process, it is painful, right? You go out and you find a local operator and you work with them, you do a bunch of contracts with them, and it's a long, painful, drawn-out process. Partnering with AWS, with the product we launched in MWC, a product called Integrated Private Wireless, we are allowing operators to now say, you can ride on the backbone and start to build global use cases where these private networks can span not just regions and geographies where you have capability, but also places where you don't. And that backbone that AWS has will actually transport your data back and forth. We've been working with Deutsche Telekom and a couple of others on use cases and examples. It is really interesting to kind of see what use cases we're unlocking. I think as you talk about digitizing industries, that is one of the big steps that I see us moving forward with. We had an announcement at Adam's keynote today about what's happening with Kuiper. And this is another way of telco starting to think about how do you reinvent what you think about when you think about connectivity. As an example, you can now say, once the Kuiper service launches, how do I take remote locations where I don't want to deploy a lot of infrastructure, but at a very cost-efficient way, start to use Kuiper as my backhaul? It unlocks use cases for disaster recovery. When something breaks, how do you make sure that you have a fallback onto a satellite network to start to bring that traffic back in? We announced private enterprise connectivity, which is the ability for customers to get connected from a location into the AWS cloud directly through the satellite networks. So you can start to see there's a number of iterations in terms of innovation that we're driving, both on the stack and in the capabilities that telcos can drive. We'll walk through some more examples. I think Ishwar's going to come up here in a second, and we'll talk about Gen AI. We're going to talk about really the developer model that we're building out. So super excited to see that we're stepping from, hey, there's infrastructure improvements that we're driving, to we're now co-inventing and innovating together. So Ishwar, over to you.
Thank you, Shivas. So we are at the layer of the stack, which is all about co-inventing and co-developing with our telco customers. And Shivas talked about one segment of it, which was co-inventing connectivity, which relies a lot on our infrastructure assets, backbone, data centers, et cetera. I'm going to now talk about some of the platforms that we are co-developing and co-innovating based on the services that run on top of this infrastructure. So we have a fair bit of services on top of the infrastructure. There's IoT, there's machine learning, there's analytics, and how can we use these services to help telcos open up new sources of revenue, create platforms that can serve and open new businesses, as well as manage internal operations more efficiently, is what this layer is about. So I'm going to go over two examples. One is like an internal-facing platform or application, if you may. And this is about an omni-channel contact center using Amazon Connect. Digitizing contact centers is very critical to improving customer experience. Clunky and old solutions typically are very hard to update. They struggle with innovating and adding features, and which is why we developed Amazon Connect. Amazon Connect is a service we have which, with a few clicks, customers can just set up a contact center in the cloud. Customers can scale up and down depending upon how many customers they want to serve, and onboard tens of thousands of agents in a matter of a few days. We have artificial intelligence and machine learning embedded in this right from day one to really improve agent productivity and customer service. So when Dish set out to modernize their contact center, we looked at how Amazon Connect could help them. We did a pilot with 100 agents to just get an understanding of the use cases and how they wanted the contact center deployed, to make a decision in terms of going into productization and scaling it up. And once we reached that stage, we were able to migrate 6,000 agents in a day, leading up to 9,000, 15,000 in 2 weeks. So very rapid onboarding of agents. The number of calls that could be served per hour increased by 25%. And if you saw Adam's keynote this morning, we have announced more features in Amazon Connect based on generative AI technology. Now you can use our managed service Bedrock, our generative AI managed service Bedrock, which gives you access to foundation models through APIs to add features into Amazon Connect. So with the capabilities that we have, not only have we modernized the contact center, we have set our customers on a path to innovating and adding features very rapidly as they evolve their contact center story. Another example of co-inventing platforms is about generating new sources of revenue beyond just connectivity. And this is the example that both Adolfo and Shivas referred to earlier, which is a smart home platform. We co-developed this with TELUS, and underlying this are two IoT services that we built. One is to enable zero-touch provisioning and onboarding of first-party, second-party, and third-party devices. And the second service is a single pane of glass for interfacing and provisioning these devices through back-end systems that telcos already have. And these are the operations support systems, OSS, and the business support systems, VSS, charging systems, et cetera. So the CSP middleware layer interfaces with these services to really create a platform on which the telcos themselves or third-party ISVs can build smart home applications. And these could be applications for conservation of energy, for security monitoring. There's a whole wide variety of applications that can be built. But this is a great example of how we've used some of the services on top of our infrastructure and co-developed a new platform with a customer like TELUS to really open up new sources of revenue, to get more ARPU out of their customers, to improve customer satisfaction, as well as reduce the CapEx involved. So that was the layer of co-inventing platforms, and we have another great story from Globe and Stellar Elements about how they were able to create a hyper-personalized customer journey, which also involves Amazon Bedrock, which is the Gen AI managed service that I just spoke about. So let's listen in.
Hi, I'm Karthik Krishna, Head of Product and Digital Growth at Globe Telecom. We believe customer experience is the true differentiator.
Here at Stellar Element, we also recognize that only with industry-leading technology, we can help our clients to deliver the finest customer service. That's why, as an Amdocs company, we have been an AWS strategic partner since 2018. Alongside AWS, we have built something remarkable. Something that will transform the way Globe interacts with its customer. We call it the Connected Customer Journey.
CCJ has 3 pivotal goals. First, real-time issue resolution. Second, enhancing operational efficiency. Third, elevating customer lifetime value.
We have built a platform that equips Globe with the ability to track their individual customer experiences. It then uses this data foundation to predict the journey that a customer is going to have and proactively remediates or improves these journeys, thus providing customer with the next best experience suited for each individual customer.
CCJ is also tackling the issue of churn with real-time machine learning and dynamic customer segmentation. It enables us to understand when and how to interact with customers for the best outcomes.
The technology behind Connected Customer Journey is impressive. It leverages Amazon Bedrock, Amazon Neptune ML, and Amazon SageMaker, using the right machine learning tool for a real-time predictions, journey segmentation, and more.
This is the future of customer experience, and we invite you to join us on this journey at AWS re:Invent.
Moving on to another layer of the stack, which is workloads, running telco workloads on our infrastructure. What we've seen in this space is an adoption journey over time, where telcos, like most other customers, started with enterprise workloads, then moved on to data type of workloads. And very recently, we have enabled telcos to run network workloads. And by network workloads, I mean network components that are now virtualized software appliances that can be run on the cloud. So I'll talk a little bit about what we've done so far and some of the things that we are seeing coming up in this space very recently. So the cloud-native journey, we've achieved quite a lot in the last couple of years. Firstly, we bridged the cloud-telco gap. We had to adapt the cloud to be able to run these network workloads. They had different performance requirements. They had millions of IPs and multiple network interfaces, which the cloud services like EC2, VPC did not have. So we had to build all of that. So we built that, made the cloud capable of running these network workloads. We worked with ISVs who build these network functions to write their applications in a more cloud-native manner. So this was a journey we went over the last couple of years. We applied operational model of the cloud to networks, CI/CD, 24/7 updates, bringing or updating without any downtime, things of that nature. And in the process, we built a very deep and broad partner ecosystem, not only at a business partnership level, but deep engineering collaboration levels. And as a result, we've been able to run production workloads for a significant category of the workloads. We run OSS-based systems, we run IMS core and packet core now in the cloud for some of our customers. What we're seeing now is an expansion of these use cases where the cloud does things that traditional ways of deploying were not able to do. So the first one is around multi-tenancy and network as a service. One of the properties of the cloud is it's a multi-tenant infrastructure. It is also very agile in the sense that a lot of the applications are deployed, run, using simple API calls. So it's an as-a-service model. And we're bringing that to networks. WG2, or Working Group 2, which is now part of Cisco, is an example of a company who built a fully cloud-native core, and they are running this core in a multi-tenanted manner on AWS. So multiple MVNOs, MNOs, private network builders can use this multi-tenanted core to build networks with a few simple API calls very quickly. So not only is it multi-tenanted, but it's offered in as a service model. And we see this as a fundamental difference beyond just achieving the functionality, scale, and reliability required for networks. These are characteristics of networks which are not possible in traditional models. Let's look at what Mobi, which is a wireless MVNO, did using Working Group 2's packet core, which is offered as a service on AWS.
Operating a mobile core, sort of the brains of any wireless network, is very expensive typically, both in terms of time and energy and money. And we didn't want to go down that same path if we could figure out a way that would be certainly more flexible, more redundant and resilient, and hopefully even more affordable. And that led us to working with Working Group 2, WG2, and they, years ago, came up with this idea of building a mobile core that lived entirely in the cloud, lives in AWS. We were able to go from signing on the dotted line with them and having that mobile core live and in the cloud. I think it was less than a week, and that, that's sort of insane timing in our industry. There's nothing compared to the time to live that you can get to, but also the pace of innovation that we see from AWS in terms of new functionality, new features, new services. And by taking what we are able to tap into with WG2 and AWS and extending that to our own customers, they'll be able to build and develop things on our network and our platform that we haven't even thought of yet and haven't even imagined yet as well. And that's pretty exciting for us.
A second use case that I wanted to talk about, which the cloud enables, which traditional models do not, is about high availability and disaster recovery for the network. Normally, these techniques are evaluated by metrics such as RPO and RTO, which are kind of the maximum amount of time that transpires between a network going down and coming up. That's RTO, and RPO is the amount of time you need to store backups before the network comes up. And traditional techniques range from backup and store to pilot light, and they have different varying RPO, RTO metrics, as well as the cost involved. But here, the property of elasticity of the cloud comes into play. The cloud is elastic, so you use resources when you need them, you relinquish them when you don't need them, and you pay only for what you consume. And that lends itself very nicely to high availability and disaster recovery type of scenarios. We can create an active deployment with the cloud, where you could have a copy of the network on premises and the backup copy or the recovery copy in the cloud. And you could burst into the backup when needed, when there's a disaster, when you really need the backup. You could also have both these copies in the cloud and work across availability zones. But the key point here is that you're not paying for it at all times, which is what you have to do in traditional model, where you provision hardware for redundancy and high availability. So essentially, what we are able to do with the cloud here is really achieve RPO and RTO metrics of traditional techniques, but at a fraction of the cost. So this is another excellent example of how we are seeing use cases go beyond just basically achieving functionality of the network to areas where traditional deployment models fall short or are expensive. So these were two examples of these cases. I also wanted to talk a little bit about how we are bringing AWS innovation to telco workloads. So beyond just cloud, we are looking at what we can do as a company to innovate in this space to either be able to run these workloads more efficiently or at a better price point. And again, I think Shivas referred to Graviton earlier. It's been one of our cornerstones of our in-house silicon innovation. And a lot of the telco workloads we see, for example, the RAN stack, are very performance demanding. And something like Graviton gives you a much better price performance for these type of workloads. The power efficiency of these chips is also, ARM is basically a very power efficient architecture, so you get power efficiency advantages by running these telco workloads on the Graviton chips. Lastly, it's also about flexibility and choice. One of our key tenets at AWS has always been giving customers the choice. And the industry has been dependent on x86 for a long time, and we see this as an option not only for customers but also for ISVs as an alternative architecture that has other benefits of price performance as well as power efficiency. And Docomo deployed the NEC packet core on Graviton and saw 70% reduction in power savings on an average. Nokia has been porting their RAN stack onto Graviton, and again, we see tremendous performance efficiency improvements, as well as compatibility with L1 accelerators, which are a very key part of the RAN stack, and a lot of them are being built on ARM architectures. So again, a lot of benefits to having an alternative architecture. We have invested pretty significantly in this. We see benefits in across workloads, across industries, but definitely for telcos where there's a lot of high performance workloads where power consumption is critical, we see a big benefit for using these. Topic of the day, generative AI. Let's see how we are using generative AI across the stack to really enable our telco customers. So AI/ML has been around for a while. We've been working in this space ever since the company's been around, actually. But what we've seen recently is a tipping point with generative AI. And that's happened because of a few things. One is massive proliferation of data. We have a lot of data available, and that's been happening over the past few years. Secondly, compute has become cheaper, affordable to run these large models. And that's, again, been happening for the past few years. But what really changed the game was the new neural network architecture, the transformer architecture, which really enabled the industry to build very, very large foundational models with hundreds of billions of parameters that can create new content. And that's what this is all about. At this reInvent, you'll see a lot of sessions. There's a lot of very, very interesting content on what we are doing with generative AI. So please, go to all of the sessions and learn as much as you can. Here, I just wanted to summarize our strategy, the 4 pillars of our strategy in this space to kind of set the context for the next few slides. So we have 4 key levers that we are enabling developers to build Gen AI applications. The first one is around creating an easy way to build with foundational models. So our strategy is to democratize access to foundational models. And through our service, Bedrock, we give access to many third-party models. Through SageMaker, we give access to open source models. So you can pick and choose the foundation model and build with those models. Secondly, for folks who need compute to train models or do customized inference, we provide infrastructure. And I'll talk a little more about that in a subsequent slide. The third vector is around developing Gen AI applications themselves. So what we've learned over the past few years in our machine learning journey is there are a lot of capabilities that are undifferentiated for an average customer. Like transcribe is a great example, AWS transcribe, transcribing voice to text. You don't want to be investing your resources in doing that. It's something that everybody needs, and we created this service for anybody who wants that capability. So you'll see a lot of applications come from our side where we will identify applications where we think we can add value to multiple customers. Code Whisperer is a very good example of that, where based on natural language prompts or seeding with code that is already written, we can generate new code. We announced Q today, which is a personal assistant based on generative AI technology that can be customized for businesses. So this can be used by employees to get advice, to get questions answered. That's another classic example of something that pretty much everybody's going to need And you don't want every customer, every company investing in building this, so we build that for all of our customers. So that's the third vector where we are looking at actually building applications, GenAI applications themselves. And the last one is really giving flexibility to build with foundational models. So when you want to build foundational model, when you want to build a GenAI application with foundational models, you need to pick the right model. You need to tune it with some of your proprietary data, the different levels of tuning, fine tuning, deep tuning, instruction level tuning. You might want to remove bias. You might want to assess the type of hallucinations and the extent of hallucinations. And so we've created an environment and a managed service that allows you and gives you the flexibility to build using these foundational models. So these are the four kind of strategic vectors we have in our GenAI strategy. With telcos, we are seeing quite a few use cases emerge. The ones that are common across the industry, obviously, we see them with our telco customers as well. These are around customer experience. These are around productivity, creating new content for marketing and other purposes, other similar purposes. But the key one, the really one that bubbles to the top, is enhanced customer experience. This is about really understanding the customer, predicting what the customer might need, giving the customer recommendations. And this is bubbling to the top, obviously, because it touches the customer, but also because the technology is here today. Using today's foundational models, you can start building this. So we're seeing a lot of traction in this, and here's a very good example of a telecom in the telecom space with Liberty Latin America that used our technology to create a customer experience, better customer experience.
My name is Mauricio Romero, and I am the head of Advanced Analytics for Liberty Latin America. We serve a footprint of more than 20 million inhabitants across 20 different countries. One of the main challenges is to make sure that our customers are getting the right experience. Now, with generative AI and Amazon Bedrock capabilities, we can understand better the root cause of our customers' issues without investing the time that our human or agent needs to take in order to summarize his code. Using Amazon Bedrock, we can fully understand through natural language questions which are potential new problems or root causes that we are not aware of. Reducing the call time, reducing our spend, and increasing the effectiveness of our solutions, and of course, increasing the customer satisfaction out of the interaction, and saving money of potential follow-up calls for non-solved issues. As a telecom company, we have massive amount of data that we generate from our customers. Thanks to our partnership with Amazon, now we are able to better understand our customers and their needs through all the data that they generate. This was completely unseen 10 years ago. And having the ability not only to process the data, but to better understand through solutions like LLMs, Bedrock, or all the analytics suite that we have with Amazon is definitely going to change the way we operate and we do business in the next years.
The next set of use cases we are seeing are around business and network operations. This is the area that I'm most excited about in terms of where GenAI will play a role with our telco customers. Network operations. And it's not just operations. We see a path towards network planning, network design, network configuration. But what can be done today is in the operations space. The technology can be used to read customer signals as well as data from the network, signals from the network, to predict network failures, as well as help troubleshoot when there is a network failure. Interactive chatbots can be used to guide a technician through a troubleshooting process much more efficiently than, say, reading a manual or being trained in the multiple scenarios that might occur. We see this as a very rich space for GenAI. And I think we're just scratching the surface in terms of what GenAI can do for networks, right from planning, design, configuration to operations. One of our customers, Cox, has implemented a great use case here with network operations that I would like to share with you.
I'm Joe Keller, Vice President of Operations and Technology Analytics at Cox Communications. We have over 6 million residential subscribers that we provide broadband services to. That's internet, video, and phone services. Historically, our industry has relied upon our customers to serve as our primary diagnostic, contacting us when they experience an issue. We were seeking some type of a solution that would allow us to harness the power of all the massive amounts of data that we have from cable modems and set-top boxes and put that to good use, enabling us to better detect and prevent customer issues from happening. And that's where we started to work in Amazon Web Services, harnessing the power of the next generation capabilities that AWS has to offer us in order to stand up our novel framework called Service Health. Service Health allows us to start identifying patterns of imminent failure, proactively reaching out to our customers in scenarios where they experience issues. We decided to go with Amazon Web Services because of the differentiating services, ease of use, and the capabilities that the platform offered us. With traditional analytics, we're able to derive insights from structured data. With Amazon Bedrock, we're leveraging all of the unstructured data that's available to us. This might be anonymized customer transcripts across chats and calls. This might be the journal entries that our technicians make when they're trying to remediate issues in our network. What we've been able to do is provide forensic tools now to our service assurance teams, our network operations center, as well as to our technicians in the field to start identifying optimizations across process, platforms, and policies to help improve upon their ability to resolve complex and elusive issues more quickly. This is an untapped gold mine of data that prior to now we haven't been able to tap into.
The one other area I wanted to talk about was purpose-built accelerators. This is another key piece of our Gen AI strategy, where folks who want to build who want to train models from scratch or who want to customize their inference, we provide custom silicon that we have built for either training or inference. This morning we announced Trainium 2, which is our next generation training chip, which is 4 times faster than the previous generation. Inferentia 2 we've had for a while now, which is again 4 times higher and 10 times lower latency than the first generation. So we keep on improving this at a fast clip. And we're seeing customers really use this for either training, which we are just starting to see in the telco industry, but definitely for inference, which is kind of more widely adopted today in the industry. Here's an example of Deutsche Telekom, who used Inferentia to customize the inference for one of their applications.
Deutsche Telekom is one of the world's leading integrated telecommunications companies. We have over 245 million mobile customers, 25 million fixed-line customers, and about 21 million broadline customers. We are building LLM applications to create a more natural response for our customers, and one of the main challenges using generative AI is to control the type of risky behavior, hallucinations, and as well as keeping the cost down, because this is a very powerful technology and consumes a lot of computational power. So using the latest generation of dedicated hardware from AWS, we were able to achieve better non-functional performance, up until 25% compared to our baselines, while providing the same type of functional performance. Using Inferentia 2 instances, we were able to achieve 25% relative improvement on the non-functional requirements, such as throughput, latency, at a fraction of the cost. We found that the Inferentia 2 chips were, on average, about 20% more cost efficient than the G5 equivalent instances. AWS provides us with a scalable, robust, and secure platform for generative AI applications. We started with Amazon Bedrock to test the proprietary and openly available models. Then we follow up with certain candidates using Amazon SageMaker Jumpstart to have a bit more control over the parameters and at the same time not waste too much time in deployment and maintenance. Thanks to the generative AI capabilities, the agents are now able to retrieve information real time, as opposed to having to wait in several interactions or raising tickets and then getting them answered by a different sector. So now we could consolidate all the support at the same time, means that the customers are able to get faster solutions to their problems.
This brings us to the top of the stack, which is about looking at the telco as a developer platform. We see telcos evolve from being operators to becoming builders. Somewhat parallel to the cloud analogy, where we started as infrastructure providers for servers and disks to really building a developer environment. And that's where we see the telcos evolve to. So this is something that's happening now, and we see it as the promising future. Telcos have recently started looking at network APIs. Some of these APIs have been around for a while. There are different API categories. There's CPaaS APIs, which are voice, SMS, which have been around now for a while now. But there are standards bodies now working on other categories of APIs. So the CAMARA and GSMA standard alliances are working on network APIs that give information from the network, such as device location, congestion information, as well as allow the ability to control the network and control prioritization and quality of service, things of that nature. So there's a category of network APIs that are being standardized in the industry. There's 5G Future Forum, which is working on another set of APIs called bidirectional APIs, which are APIs to communicate between telcos and hyperscalers. And there's TM Forum, which has again been around for a while, developing operator APIs that interface with OSS, BSS systems, and other layers of the telco stack. These APIs have the capability of really enabling telcos to offer their network as a developer platform. But what telcos don't have today is a large developer community, and they don't have the other applications and services that are needed to build applications. You need compute, you need storage, you need databases. And that's where we see ourselves partnering. We have over 200 plus services with thousands of APIs, and we see the combination of these as a very, very compelling developer experience. And what we are looking at is how do we create a seamless developer experience which combines our assets with this new approach that the telcos are evaluating, which is offering network capabilities through APIs to really enhance the developer experience to build more network-aware applications. And we are seeing use cases such as video streaming that takes advantage of being able to set bandwidth and a network slice dedicated for video streaming. We're seeing applications where device location from the network can be used, or information about SIM swap can be used to build banking, fraud detection applications for banking customers. So there's a potential for a rich set of applications here that use capability from the network. There's a potential of offering the network in newer consumption models and in a more flexible manner for developers to use in combination with AWS. We believe this partnership will be significant as we go on this journey of partnering with telcos, not only at the infrastructure layer, not only at the services layer, but really enabling a compelling developer experience for developers. So hopefully you got a good summary of how we are approaching our telco customers, not only selling technology to help them build offerings, but really co-developing and co-inventing with them on some of these offerings. There's a lot of sessions we have focused on telcos. Some of these have already happened, but they will be on YouTube in a week or so. So I encourage all of you to take a look at all of these sessions. They go deeper into some of the topics that we've been able to just touch on in this session. And this is one of the most things that I find exciting at re:Invent is our demos. We have a demo area on the expo floor with customers. We have quite a few demos. And there's nothing like seeing some of this innovation really being built and in action. So I encourage you to stop by the demos and take a look at some of these demos. Thank you for spending your time here this afternoon. And we'll be available outside. I think we have only a minute here, but here on the side or outside to answer any questions. But thank you for coming, and thank you for listening.